Oops, the Pentagon made a little mistake over the weekend. Somehow, it lost track of 50 intercontinental ballistic missiles. The screw-up happened at the Warren Air Force Base in Wyoming and became public after a former U.S. Air Force missile launch officer tweeted about the loss of communication between the missiles and the control center. This at the same time as members of the Obama administration have spoken repeatedly over the past 2 years about the importance of safe and secure nuclear programs.
Violations must be punished. Words must mean something. The world must stand together to prevent the spread of these weapons.
We will take concrete steps toward a world without nuclear weapons while retaining a safe, secure, and effective arsenal.
As long as nuclear weapons are required to deter aggression and defend our country and our allies, we will maintain a safe, secure, and effective nuclear arsenal.
A nuclear weapon in the hands of a terrorist is a danger to people everywhere.
So how could a mistake of this magnitude happen, and what does it say about the United States' own nuclear program? Well, joining me to help discuss this is Michelle Chossudovsky, director of the Center for Research on Globalization. So, Michelle, I wanted to ask you just how big of a screw-up this really was. I mean, put this in perspective for us. Not everyone is familiar with an intercontinental ballistic missile or what it's capable of doing. And as far as I understand, this loss of communication actually affected 1/9 of the U.S. arsenal. What was a worst-case scenario in this situation? Just how bad could this have been?
I think this is not the worst-case scenario by any means. The worst-case scenario is when politicians go around saying that nuclear weapons are harmless to civilians, which the Obama administration, President Obama, Hillary Clinton, the Pentagon, and Robert Gates have been saying we want to have safe nuclear weapons. There's no such thing as safe nuclear weapons. And in the last few months, they have continued to threaten Iran with a preemptive nuclear attack. And that ultimately doesn't even make front-page news. That is the danger, is when politicians themselves use nuclear weapons in the conventional war theater. And bear in mind that the Senate a few years ago actually reclassified tactical nuclear weapons as safe for civilians and recategorized them as conventional weapons.
Yeah, it's so interesting because members of the Obama administration repeatedly talk about the nuclear programs or the importance of safety and security in the nuclear arsenals of Russia or North Korea or Iran, as you pointed out. But how can it not have its own arsenal secure?
Well, you know, the mistakes in computer systems is something which is ongoing in storage and deployment. It's known and documented. We know the work of Helen Caldicott, the very celebrated author on this subject. Invariably, the news doesn't get out, and public opinion is simply not informed. Instead, we're told that the threat to humanity is the H1N1. Now, I think that we are at a very dangerous crossroads, notwithstanding this incident in Wyoming, because the United States and its allies, NATO, are pointing nuclear weapons at not only at Iran, but several other countries. And they have said that they can use these weapons on a preemptive basis. Now, any kind of nuclear attack on Iran would lead to a World War III scenario. This is very clear, and it's well understood, but it is not front-page news. The threat to humanity resulting from those weapons is not front-page news. Just about a week ago, Fidel Castro actually made a statement to that effect. It was our initiative. I spent several days with him, interviewing him on that issue. We'll be publishing a much more extensive analysis of the military agenda in the Middle East and Central Asia. But his message to the world was very clear. Said a conventional war against Iran will inevitably evolve towards a nuclear war. And that would in turn lead to a global war.
Right.
And that piece of news was literally hidden. It was published in Latin America. It came out in Spanish, Portuguese, but it did not appear in any of the major news outlets in North America.
Right.
Presumably because Fidel Castro isn't entitled to have an opinion after having studied the matter quite seriously for the last few months.
Yeah, we were just looking at some pictures of him making that statement, actually, and it's something that we have reported here on RT. And I know I've talked to you a lot about the potential nuclear blowout between Israel and Iran. And it's interesting because President Obama has made it one of his top priorities, at least he says he is, to have a world without nuclear weapons, or at least try to significantly decrease the amounts that exist. Yet I actually read a report recently that said that the Department of Energy is actually getting ready to double the amount of nuclear weapons at a cost of $175 billion in the next 20 years. What's going on there? Some have said that maybe they aren't going to actually make the nuclear weapons. Maybe they're just getting ready to have capabilities to make the weapons if they're needed. But either way, there seems to be a lot of contradiction going on here.
I have seen some of those reports. At this stage, we can't really have conclusive figures, but definitely we're in a process of military escalation and tremendous expenditures on advanced weapon systems, not on conventional warfare, on advanced weapon systems. Just a few weeks back, Saudi Arabia is to take delivery of some $60 billion worth of U.S. military equipment, and then the Emirates another $30 billion. That's $90 billion. The same thing, India is taking delivery. That whole area, the Arabian Sea, is militarized. And nuclear weapons are deployed not only by the United States, Israel, but by, believe it or not, by Germany, Belgium, Holland, Italy, and Turkey. 5 non-nuclear states where U.S. nuclear weapons are deployed, but they're under national command, so that these countries are, in fact, just as much a threat to global security as Israel or the United States.
Right, and you definitely don't hear much information about that. You mentioned how the Castro remarks were not really picked up on the mainstream news at all in North America, but it also seemed like this incident in Wyoming was barely talked about on the mainstream media. It seems like whenever anything about nuclear weapons in Iran pops up in the news, it's the top story on every channel. But if nuclear weapons are so bad and scary, as you've kind of pointed out already, shouldn't nuclear weapons being lost somewhere in Wyoming be scary for Americans too?
Well, I think that we should follow the statement of Fidel Castro to destroy and abolish all those nuclear weapons and all so-called weapons of mass destruction. Now, the United States is the biggest nuclear power on Earth. It has the capability to blow up the planet. Let us be very clear. This is not an understatement. And it's not Al-Qaeda, it's not bin Laden, which is the threat as suggested in these statements by President Obama. I mean, these are ridiculous statements. The threat comes from the United States of America, NATO, and Israel. And it is directed against a country which does not pose any threat to global security, namely the Islamic Republic of Iran.
Yeah, well, that's why we like talking to you. Always a different perspective and opinion. Michelle Chossudovsky, Director of the Center for Research on Globalization.